Hello there, this is Instructor Paul, and in this lecture, we're going to learn about PowerShell Variables. So we're going to do most of our work today in the PowerShell ISE, although you can use either one that you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the ISE, and one thing to keep in mind is that I'm running this as an administrator. Okay, and this is important because some of you might have PowerShell execution policies that may block you running scripts. So one way to get around that is to run the PowerShell as an administrator, and you can change the execution policy. Again, we're not going to get into that in this lecture, but just so you understand how my environment is set up, I wanted to make sure I made that clear. So first, let's talk about what is actually a variable. Well, it's something that's not fixed, or it doesn't have a fixed pattern, and it's liable to change, right? So in our old math classes, we learned, x equals 1, and if we do x plus x would equal 2, and x times x is equal to 1, because we're essentially doing 1 times 1 is equal to 1, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, 1 divided by 1, so x divided by x would be equal to 1, because if you divide, basic math, we all understand what this basically means. Well, in PowerShell, we can also use variables, and we won't only be using it to store, basic math or basic integer numbers. We can also store strings and different things like that, and it's extremely useful. So let's just jump right in and get started. So how do you actually declare a variable? Well, in PowerShell, it's as simple as using the $ or shift4, and then we just declare the variable name. So we can call it my variable. And if I run this, I can hit play, and we have just declared a variable. Now, if we echo out this variable, say my variable, and we can either do this up here in the IC, or we can do it down here in the command prompt, doesn't matter. If we press enter, we're going to get a blank output because we haven't assigned any type of value to my variable. We could say, I'm just going to use this command line down here at the bottom, we could say my variable equal to test and press enter. And now if we type in echo my variable, press tab for auto completion, we now get test. Now another way we can output this data is simply by just typing in the name of the variable. So my variable, press tab and enter. Notice I'm not typing in the word echo or anything like that. If I just press enter, it will output the contents of this variable, or whatever the value that is assigned to this variable. So let's just say make a new variable. We'll call it processes. And this processes is going to be equal to get dash process. And I'll press tab to autocomplete that. And if we run this, again, we're not going to get any result. But now if we echo processes, we're going to get the output of the command get process, which was stored in the variable processes. So if I scroll up here, we can see the output of this variable. Okay. Now, if I was just to run get dash processes at the same time, press enter, we'll get the exact same output. The reason why it's useful to store information into variables, it can capture, a specific state of our computer at a specific point in time. We can manipulate these variables later on and that kind of thing. So if we wanted to manipulate the data that was stored in processes, we can just type in that variable name, hit tab, and we can pipe that to a select-object command. And as you know, select-object will allow us to choose, for example, the ID and the process name. We could do that by just saying ID in process name. Press enter, and now we are just outputting those two information. So, or those two columns rather. So you're able to manipulate this information just like just running the get process command. So if we run get process, type that through, we get the exact same output. One of the most useful things when you're doing processing variables, a lot of times you'll want to get the user input. So if we create a variable, we'll call this user input. And we're going to say is equal to read-host. And I can either type in a prompt in quotation marks, or I can do dash prompt, whatever I want. It's more efficient, of course, just to type in quotation marks. But if we do dash prompt and we say, please enter your name, just for example, and we press enter, it's going to give us, it's executing this command, read host, and it's saying, please enter your name. So I can enter my name, Paul. Now, Paul is now stored inside of user input, this variable. So if we echo user input, we're going to get the value of that variable, which is equal to this read host command. Now, what I was talking about earlier, if we want to do user input is equal to read-host, we don't have to say dash prompt like we did here. We could simply just say, please enter your, I'll just say first name just to make it different. Press enter, and it's saying, please enter your first name. Okay, so you can see the difference. You don't always have to enter dash prompt. It will be implied. So I could just say, you know, Joe, press enter. And now if I echo, or if I just type in user input and press enter, it will output the contents of this variable, which is Joe. All right, now let's talk about how you can output the value of a variable to a file. If I take this user input and I want to store this in a file format, there's two ways that we can do this. First, we could just say user input and then do a greater than sign, and we could just say file.txt. What that's going to do is it's going to take the contents of user input, this variable, and it's going to output that contents to a file called file.txt, and this will be inside of my C Windows System32 directory. So if I press enter, now if I type in cat, and then we do file.txt, I'll press tab to autocomplete. Cat means output the contents of the file. All right, it's an alias for the PowerShell command. If I just press enter, it's going to output what is inside of file.txt, and we can see Joe is outputted. So if I drag File Explorer over here, I can also just view that file that I just created. I can go to C, Windows. And a quick tip, when you guys are browsing the file system, instead of scrolling down and looking for Windows, if I simply type in the word Windows while this little pane here is in focus, it will select whatever I type in. So I can type in Windows, and then I can type in System32, and it takes me right to that folder. That can save you guys a lot of time when you're navigating this GUI, just, you know, versus scrolling up and down and trying to find different things. So we're gonna open System32, and inside of here, I should be able to type in file, and there it is, file.txt. So if I open this file, I can see that the contents is Joe. All right. Now there is another way that you guys can append variables directly to a file. We could write, I'll just do it up here in the IC. We could write set-content. And one thing that I want you guys to understand is there's a million different ways you can achieve the same goal when it comes to scripting or programming. So feel free to come up with your own ways to get things done. Just always try to do it in the most efficient way possible and with the least amount of lines of code possible. That's always better. So efficient is always better. So we're going to do dash value, and the value is going to be the value we're going to pass to this file. In this case, we'll assign it to user input, which we haven't really created yet. So, I mean, it'll still be there because it's stored in memory, but up here we should say user input is equal to read dash host, and then please enter something, save in your file. Okay. So that's going to be the value of user input. We're going to use the set-content command to store this information. Now, really quick, like as a theme with this course, we want to run get-help and set-content. If we press enter, scroll this up here, we can see exactly how we're supposed to use this command. It replaces the contents of a file with the contents that you specify. So set-content value, we can do a confirm if we want credential, that kind of thing. The last thing that we need to specify to really run this command is the path. So we're going to do dash path, and I was able to cycle through these by hitting shift and tab. So I can cycle forward by hitting tab and cycle backwards by hitting shift tab. Okay. So the dash path is going to be file.txt. So now if we execute this script, we're just going to hit F5 or the play button up here, and it's going to say, please enter something to save in your file. This is some really cool text that I am saving in my file, and I'll press enter. Okay, so now if we run that cat command for file.txt using the up arrows to find that command easily, or we can just type in cat file.txt, press tab to autocomplete. If I press enter, now I can see the contents in that file is this is some really cool text that I'm saving in my file. Now, like I was showing you, there's different ways you can work with variables to output them to different files. But using user variables is one of those things when you guys get to scripting, it's something you have to understand how to do. One of the most common ways that you interact with variables is, by reading the user host, getting input, creating navigational menus and things like that, text-based menus. So that's all we got for this lecture about variables. Great job getting through this one, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next lecture.